Tim, just sticking on that point, why is there a delay with conveyancing? I personally, I've just sold my house, and we're going to rented accommodation until we know what we want to buy. But for the Lord of money, it's taken 9-10 weeks to get through the conveyancing process. Every solicitor you speak to, they've laid people off and then saying, well, we're just, the partners are taking on more work. Is that the general consensus? Because I'm seeing a lot of threads talk about conveyancing, and since you're a legal firm, you've got to take the brunt of it all. I'm afraid.
Absolutely, I'm butch enough. I'll take it on the chin. There are, I'd say, three issues, and one I'd like Simon to comment on in a minute. One, I think, is mortgage companies. Certainly, our experience and talking to our conveyancers. In fact, the mortgage companies, not the brokers, are slow. And certainly, I spoke to one of them today. What would normally take a couple of weeks is now taking 4 or 5. Again, that's one thing. Secondly, there's an issue with getting local searches back. Again, every local authority will vary, but certainly we've noticed locally that some of them are getting quite slow. Hampshire, I know my area with Bromwich, that's about 3 weeks now, but Wiltshire is more like 6, and that can really add some time on. It's not as bad as it once was. Wiltshire about 5-10 years ago went up to 6 months at one stage, horrendous. But there are ways around that with either personal searches or insurance, but that's slowing down the market. But I would say the biggest single slowdown in the market is solicitors. I'm going to say, as a profession, a lot of us aren't doing very well. And I would say what's happened is that the profession, effectively, particularly conveyancers, has been divided into 2 types. There's type number 1, who are reasonably okay. They're coping quite well. They've got technology in place. They've got phones. They've got email. They've got Zoom. They're modern. They've got their staff working from home or from the office or whatever, and they're working reasonably well. Occasional delays, but it's not far off normal standards. And you've got this other tranche of firms who are, to be frank, simply horrendous. I spoke to one of my conveyancers today, and I said, "How bad is it for you with some of the other guys?" And so she said, "Give me 2 or 3 names. They're good, they're fine as usual." But she said the others, and she mentioned some names in particular, are just simply awful. And she reckoned, in her experience, it was 80% are in that dodgy tranche at the moment. Why? Well, a number of reasons. Firstly, going back to my terribly complicated graphic, we had the drop there and the bulge there. So if you've got that number of solicitors, you've now got this massive bulge. Now, we've seen this coming for a while. So we've got a locum. We've also now got 2 paralegals who I've taken on for 6-month contracts to do some of the basic stuff. So we're constantly, and also some of our part-timers, we've said, would you like to work extra hours now and extra days now and get the extra time off next year where there's likely to be less demand? So some of them have said yes. So we're trying to find ways of giving short-term relief, I guess. But a lot of firms aren't. They're slow. They can't cope with technology. They laid people off. They've been furloughed. They're trying to cut costs. And some of them simply have no idea how to use Zoom, haven't got the technology they can work from home, and are simply ghastly. We have some who simply don't email you back. You email and you email and you email and you're waiting. Ghastly. So my suggestion is, if anybody is appointing a solicitor, try to make sure, if you can identify which one of those 2. Are they brand A or brand B? If you've got a good one, stick with them. If they want a brand B, try to find someone else. And also bear in mind, if you're buying, it's all very well if you've got brand A, but if the other side's got brand B, the slow guys, you're going to be stuffed. So if you can try to persuade the other side to get someone who's sensible, if you know of someone, it's also possible for law firms to act on both sides in certain circumstances, provided there's no conflict of interest. You need to have some sort of barrier between them. So in my firm, we have 4 offices. So one rule is, if you have 2 people on both sides, number 1, they're always in a separate office. And number 2, the technology we use, you can put a block on certain people so they can't go into your computer records and see what the other side is doing. But having them in the same organisation means there is more trust. So that can be one solution. But I would suggest, if you are taking on a solicitor, try to find out from them how quickly they're going to come back. So, for example, if they give you an automatic quote online, which some do, just you put a figure in and they come back automatically, email them, see how quickly they come back. Give them a call, test them out, and also ask them perhaps what have they done to make up for this huge, it is a horrible bulge that we're all coping with. How are they coping with that? Good firms will tell you they're either doing something, or some will actually say, I'm sorry, but we can't help you at the moment because we won't be quick enough. But avoid the ones who want all the work and do it for cheap. Oh, wow. One last tip. If you want to speed things up, and this is something I only came across literally a couple of weeks ago. For years, everyone's known to get mortgage stuff through on time, you've got to make sure the banks have your right details. So it's the sort code and the account number. And normally, in our experience, that and the name has been sufficient. We've found out, and again, Simon may know much more about this than me, that the last month or so, or perhaps a little bit longer, the banks are getting more and more picky about identifying accounts. And if you don't get the exact wording now of the actual client, the name of the account, they'll often send it back. check. So once before you might have got someone's initials and name, and that was good enough. It's now got to be exactly right. So for me, being Tim Bishop wouldn't be enough. It would have to be either Mr. TJ Bishop or Tim Bishop or Timothy Bishop, whatever is the correct word on that particular account. And that's otherwise, if you don't get that right, that can add another few days.
It'd be Lord Bishop then, right?
You've heard, haven't you?
Oh, obviously, yes. Can I just interject a little bit? So yes, I'm finding that problem because I'm trying to sell 8 new build houses in your neck of the woods, Tim, and a lot of them tend to be first-time buyers, and so they're going for the cheapest possible solicitors. And you know, I've had offers back in June that still haven't completed. And it's driving, you know, it's actually causing us a lot of problems because we've got development finance on these houses, and we just have not. We've had altogether 7 offers for the 8 houses over a period of time. None of them have completed yet, so it's just a nightmare. So I keep sending them to you, Tim. I keep recommending you.
Thank you.
And so do the agents, because that's the only way, you know, is to get a really good solicitor. So yeah, really good.
On that subject, 2 things. My understanding is Help to Buy, and again, this is more Simon's area than mine. Help to Buy has been really slow. Government organisations sometimes have slowed even more than private business, so they can be really slow. So Help to Buy on the other side, another delay. And lastly, actually, agents are always good to tell you who solicitors are to use, but especially at the moment, the one thing they really, really, really hate is delay and things not going through. So sometimes actually local estate agents, if you want to go local and you don't have to, they can sometimes be a good source of recommendations because they'll know who the ones are good, who are reasonably good, and the ones who you would not want to touch with a barge pole, because there are plenty of them.
Just before we go on to Simon Hodgson, I've got a question for you, Tim. I mean, one of the things I was doing is sending weekly emails to the solicitor to find out where they were in the process. And apparently you can't speak to the other party's solicitor because obviously there's an issue with that. But would you say that there's got to be some sort of, you know, communication on a weekly basis to say, where are you? Would you recommend like buyers and sellers of property do that every week to chase up where we are in the process now?
We try to get all our solicitors, and we try to use technology to do it, but it doesn't always work 100% yet, to actually give regular updates every week to agents and coming into clients for that exact reason, because that's right. the usual complaint, because people aren't telling them. But on the other side, it's hard, you know, and what solicitors should be, in my experience, doing is if they contact the other side, they should be copying you in as well. I don't see why my firm should be blamed because the other firm is really slow. So actually, I'm not going out of my way to dump them in it, but I'm fed up actually having someone shout at me saying, you're really slow, but actually, we've been kicking the other side. So I think solicitors should have the guts to actually copy in their clients to actually show if there is a problem, it's somebody else, not them. And in which case, all you can do, you know, you can phone, you can ring, but sometimes people don't come back. And I'm not sure it's the case now, but certainly for the first 2 or 3 months, we found at least one firm, a really, really big firm on the South Coast who should know better, and they simply weren't taking any phone calls at all, emails only. Ghastly, you know. And of course, if they don't answer the email, how can you force them to? You simply send another email and another email. So avoid those kind of firms, and there are a lot out there at the moment. Like a lot of things, coronavirus has really sped up the differences. So once it was lots of colours of grey, actually it's much more black and white now. So it is far easier to differentiate between the ones who provide, frankly, a service they should do for the price you're paying, and the ones who don't.
And Simon, from your perspective, obviously taking on board what Tim's been saying, but if you are an active buyer of properties right now, for you, what does slow down the process, and what can the buyer and seller do to speed up the process?
Okay, well, one of the main things which kind of dovetails really nicely into what Tim was saying is that a number. So we've been taught as investors, as borrowers, to borrow as cheaply as possible. So to look at the whole of the market, pick the cheapest lender. Now, quite often, the cheapest lender will throw in free legals. Now, that is, I can see Tim smiling there. It's the number one recommendation I make to anyone. Whilst this lender is cheap, okay, do look at the component parts of what this lender will do. And if they offer you free legals, and they are offering free legals, just bear in mind that it comes at a cost. And they go, what do you mean it comes at a cost? It's free. Yes, there's the cost. The cost is free because your time is, they are suggesting your time is not valuable, so therefore they will take up lots of your time. And that's been really exacerbated in the current situation. Lenders who offer free legals, literally, their systems are not even bulging; they've broken. The floodgates have gone, and that's it. So for me, and also it's become far more apparent over the last 8 weeks, 6 weeks, which lenders' service level times have dipped or are dipping. I've got some lenders who've got service level times of 14 days. That's 14 days just to look at a document you've sent in. So I'm forever having conversations with borrowers going, right, well, we could use this lender, and I'm not going to name lenders because that's the wrong thing to do on a platform like this, especially if it's going to be recorded and put out on Facebook. But there are lenders, and if you come to me and you speak to me about borrowing, I will happily tell you which ones not to go to and which ones to go to. And I had just that conversation today. I put in front of a borrower today on a purchase 2 lenders. Lender A will give you the cheapest deal, okay, but you're not going to complete until February, maybe March, and we might be scrabbling around to get this one in before the stamp duty finishes. And they're like, what? It can't be right. I went, trust me. Trust me. This lender will want to know what you had for breakfast, what your big toe measurement is, if your big toe's different on the left side to the right side. Honestly, the level of questioning will astound you. Whereas lender B, a little bit more expensive, but their service level times are sat at 4 days. Now, 4 days is still not great, don't get me wrong, but 4 days is enough for us to work with. Yeah. And then the other thing is that some of the lenders have got systems whereby you put a document in the system and it's 14 days, but you can't backfill other documents behind that document to hold that position in the queue. So there's a lot going in to try and, to make it. So that's one of the worst things at the moment, trying to pick a lender that's going to make the thing happen. And I don't know, maybe Simon, the buyer of your property possibly had free legals included in their deal. I wouldn't be at all surprised if that was what happened.
Can I come back on one other thing? Sorry to dominate the conversation, and then I'll shut up, I promise. One thing is worth, if you're thinking of buying before perhaps some sort of crash next year, going back to the point I made about the the stamp duty holiday being removed, what will happen is that everyone will want to complete. And as a result of which, the pressure on solicitors is likely to go through the roof. So it could well be much, much worse than now. So there will come a stage where we will tell our clients, we can no longer guarantee we'll get you over the line by the end of March. So you need to bear that in mind now. So if you think your transaction's going slowly, if you instruct someone in February, it's going to be difficult. I'm not quite sure when we're going to have the cutoff. We'll do whatever we can, and we may be able to get them through, but we will start warning people. And that's something I think people do need to be aware of. If you are banking on that stamp duty holiday, you need to make sure the transaction moves really quickly. And if you've got somebody on the other side who hums and haws with mortgage, and you're suddenly finding yourself well into the new year and haven't got very far, you may have issues.